Hello, fight fans. It is time for the Monday Morning Analyst here on Monday, April 17th, 2017. I am the host of this podcast. My name is Luke Thomas. Thank you so much for watching. 3 parts to the podcast as usual. In the first segment, we go through an overview of the weekend's action. In the second part, we take a look at one fight or a couple in particular with some multimedia evidence. And then in the third part, we take a look at what's coming up in the week ahead. But not a moment to lose here, so let's get right down to it. 3 events we're going to take a look at from this past weekend. It's 2 of them very quickly, one a little bit more in detail. Bellator 177, Rizin FF5 Sakura, and then of course UFC on Fox 24. Let's start with the big stuff first and then go down to the little stuff towards the end. UFC on Fox 24, UFC on Fox, Johnson versus Hayes, UFC Kansas City, whatever you want to call it. This took place at the Sprint Center in Kansas City, Missouri. It had an attendance of 12,171 for a gate of 1.081 million. It did terrible ratings, lowest ever for overnights for a UFC on Fox. Some attributed that to the double playoff competition, both hockey and basketball. There is no doubt that it certainly contributed. However, there's also no doubt that the main attraction and the card generally, while a hardcore fan's delight, just simply didn't have enough name value to attract a wider audience. But that leads me to my opening point about Demetrious Johnson. Now, this is a podcast really about fighting and fight techniques and fight strategy and that kind of thing, and I'm going to keep it that way. But I'm just going to say, like, my response to Twitter about the bad news was, look, it does make sense, particularly if you're an MMA journalist, to pay attention to ratings, to see what kind of interest there is in a product that will tell you about where it will go and what it could potentially do and why certain people find themselves in different positions in their career. MMA is a sport that is lower to the earth than I think some of the other sports here, at least in North America. I don't worry so much about NFL ratings. They still commonly top 20, 30 million viewers for a Sunday, but MMA, things can go away very, very quickly. So it's always, or things can change very quickly anyway. So it always makes sense to pay attention to ratings. But in this particular case, this is the best pound-for-pound fighter competing today. There's just no doubt about it. Nobody can do what he does. Now, whether or not you want to say he's better than GSP or he's better than Anderson Silva as a function of who he has beaten, that's a tougher argument to make. Folks don't remember that when Anderson Silva was around, especially during like the Cote fights or the Talis Laitis fight, how much people used to say that middleweight sucked, and so him being that good didn't really tell us a whole lot. In hindsight, that might sound crazy. I can tell you, as someone who was covering the sport back then, that was a very common sentiment that was expressed by a portion of both the media and the fan base alike. So take that for what it's worth. I do think that these fighters are better than people think, but at the same time, I can understand why folks may not hold him as in high regard in terms of his record of achievement as some of these other guys. But as somebody who can do what he does, as someone who has as much skill offensively and as much skill defensively, and has, as we talked about previously in the live chat, the floor of his skill in any department is so high. Like, the worst he gets at anything is still high. He's not bad at any one thing. He doesn't have these real liabilities. And so as a consequence, what he's able to do is overwhelming. In that sense, he might be the very best who's ever done it. But wherever you lie in that debate, Demetrious Johnson, I don't really care if he doesn't do ratings anymore. I am done policing his ratings. I'm done policing his popularity. I'm just going to accept him for the extraordinary talent he is, and I'll let everyone else worry about what can be done about those issues. I just care about what a treat it is to watch him. And he beats Wilson Reis at 4:49 of the third round. I mean, what can you really say? You know what? I went back and I watched this fight this morning again. Wilson Reis was doing a lot of the right things. He was motioning side to side a lot. He was trying to keep busy. He was trying to back up Demetrious Johnson. He was trying to get him to a point where he backed him up and they could take him down or at least press him against the cage. He was trying to use his footwork to create an outside angle, and none of it ever worked. Like, if you asked Wilson Reis, what's the most you can do here? You may say, well, look, he should have just gone for the takedown kamikaze style, right? Just, you had no chance on the feet. Just go and try and take him down, because you're going to lose one way or the other. You might as well try, and we're not going to lose one way or the other, but chances are you're going to lose. You might as well go out fighting in a way that best speaks to your strengths. We're not talking about any old black belt here. We're talking about an elite black belt in Wilson Reis, an athletic one too. And he couldn't do anything. He would try to go for a takedown, and what would happen? Demetrious Johnson would automatically not merely stuff it, but stuff it and turn the corner. When he did get taken down that one time, or at least got his back put on the mat, he was able to get his hips out and behind him, use the wizard to press away. Like, he just had a real good cage awareness about himself and never really got put in a position to have to worry about that very often. And by the way, I talked more about this. If you want to see more, go ahead and give a look to my post-fight show on my personal YouTube channel. I'll put the link up right here. You can check that out. I have some additional thoughts about this fight and some of the other ones. But just speaking about this fight generally, Wilson Reis clearly did his homework. I can see why he felt prepared. He did, I think, fight to the best of his ability, but it just didn't matter. The moments of opportunity, the offensive recognition that Mighty Mouse had to be able to spot something and then attack it in an instant, whether it was at the very end of a punch, Wilson Reis throwing crisp type punches, to be honest, but even then, you are going to leave a tiniest a window. Mighty Mouse using that right hand to crack him over and over again, disrupt that rhythm, and let him know he wasn't safe there, which probably opened up some other things as well. Even that final sequence, the right hand followed immediately into the takedown, and from that takedown, he is a master of working at side control. And I was watching how he maintained top pressure. It's actually for jiu-jitsu, you can tell Wilson Reis is better, right? He was getting that underhook, and he was sliding that left leg out on top, and he was going to get free if this was a jiu-jitsu competition. But what makes Demetrious Johnson so good is that jiu-jitsu, he can't match Wilson Reis. But MMA jiu-jitsu, for MMA Wilson Reis jiu-jitsu, he probably still can't match. But he softens him up for a little bit, gets him down to the mat, and as soon as Wilson Reis gets that unhook and tries to sit up, now you see Demetrious Johnson resettle his position, start firing elbows, get him to go back down. Wilson Reis tries to come back up. He threatens a guillotine, forces him to go back down. He matches the offense and strikes of MMA into his jiu-jitsu to nullify the greater strength of Wilson Reis' jiu-jitsu in a way that overall just made him do what he was able to do. And at the end there, you could see Wilson Reis, all he needed was that hand underneath the thigh for deep half on Demetrious. Demetrious instead drives his legs to the opposite side to get three-quarter mount, separates, goes to side control, then to mount again, and then just close the show with that beautifully timed armbar. Gets it so you can see he adjusts it so that essentially the thumb would be up and the elbow would be properly positioned, and he gets him to tap right in front of Roberto Godoy, the black belt coach of Wilson Reis. Man, he's just unbelievable. It's like you're not just beating a black belt on the ground, you're beating a super good black belt on the ground, a champion at the very highest level. Wilson Reis is an extraordinary talent, but if you can soften him up and if you can show strong jiu-jitsu positioning control, his control, Demetrious Johnson, and side control is amazing. He's really good about holding a head and hip, and even if you are able to sort of recapture and get a butterfly hook in or that underhook that Wilson Reis was able to, he can just find ways to make you give up those things with vicious, quick, short, accurate ground and pound. Demetrious Johnson is incredible. He might be the most talented fighter I think I've ever seen. Just pure outright talent. The things he's able to do, the exhaustive library of skills. Where do you take a fight where this guy is at a disadvantage? And how do you keep him there? Like, you might temporarily get a takedown. He might be better on top than he is. But he can scramble really well, and he can separate really well. And then, and by the way, he's strong in the clinch. And then, by the way, he's back to his feet, and he's popping you with his jab where now you have a disadvantage or something like that. There's just jiu-jitsu for jiu-jitsu, even MMA jiu-jitsu for MMA jiu-jitsu, Wilson Reis is probably overall the grand skill of things. Back takes, sit-outs, sweeps, submissions, arm bars, chokes. Wilson Reis is probably still better there, but it didn't matter because by the time that Demetrious Johnson put him down there, he was softened. He was not, I'm saying, ready to go, but ready for Wilson to be overwhelmed with some of the other things Demetrious Johnson fights on his terms. That's what he does. Now, in my post-fight show and my own channel, which, of course, I linked up here, you can see for yourself, there's another aspect I talked about to what makes Demetrious Johnson special. He has a really good sense about when guys are about to break. Check out my post-fight show for more on that. All right, Rose Namajunas defeating Michelle Waterson at 247 of the second round. This was a great job by Rose Namajunas on the ground. I thought that it was some genius things that Michelle Waterson was trying to do, and she is outsized here, where she was trying to rotate her hips into the fence, because you can't, if someone rotates their hips this way, you have to cover them. Like, whatever direction they rotate, you got to follow. Whatever direction they follow, because what happens? How do you get an arm bar? You get an arm bar from the 90-degree twist, right? So if they create an angle on you, that's a problem. But if you cover their hips, there's no armbar straight in front of you. I mean, they can be with a triangle, but you get the idea. They need an angle typically. They need some kind of way to twist underneath you. And so if you can prevent that, if you follow by following their hips, you can do a lot of things. And so she was twisting into the fence where Rose literally couldn't cover. But what Rose did do was sneak that inside leg to pin the near leg of Waterson to never really let her get going. And I thought she had a really disciplined game plan. She didn't really fall too much for the front kicks, front leg side kick of Waterson. She was able to overcome it, get on the inside. And then at the end there, you saw her grab the elbow as she got behind Waterson, throw a couple punches, push her off, and then hit her with a head kick, Holly Holm, Ronda Rousey style. And then from there, the back take was sublime. I didn't notice this in real time either. I don't know if the commentators did. I certainly didn't mention this on my post-fight show, but one of her arms was trapped. One of Waterson's arms was trapped because in the course of taking the back, I think it was Waterson who dug it there. I think she was looking for a leg and was trying to rotate over to follow and couldn't, so it got trapped. But either way, vicious, vicious choke. You can see blood pour out of Waterson's nose when she finally snatches it up. She's a great finisher from the back, Rose Namajunas. And so this was a really disciplined game plan. Smart performance from her. She's such a smart fighter. She made big waves with flying arm bars earlier in her career. And, she can do stuff like that, but that's not what makes her good. What makes her good is that she has great offensive recognition. She's got well-rounded skills at well-rounded ranges. She has great ground and pound. You could see they were working this high guard, Michelle Waterson was, but she could never really get it high enough. For a high guard, you almost want the legs resting on the shoulders. So the person kind of by definition, to avoid submissions or any further trouble, has to get their arms inside, almost collapse them on themselves. And that never was the case. She may have collapsed one arm on one side, but then Namajunas would just wreck her with an elbow on the other side. So great job by Rose Namajunas. Robert Whittaker defeating Jacare, man. How about that? 3:28 of the second round. We're going to look at this in the second segment. Let's just talk very quickly about that stoppage. I watched it again and again. I can see why Jacare might have an issue with it, but at the same time, he was getting banged on several times, dropped several times in that fight, eating head kicks, and he turned his back. Now, he turned his back to scramble. That's not exactly the same thing as turning your back like what Chemo did when he got hit by Ken Shamrock. Ken Shamrock hit him with double underhooks. Chemo drops and then just sort of like looks away, shows him his back. When someone does that, that's the international signal for I'm done. He turns his back here, but it's not exactly the same thing. But on the other hand, Jacare's 37, man. He was taking a hellacious beating, and Robert Whittaker was on him like white on rice. I really, honest to God, just don't have a problem with it. I wish I could say that I did, but I don't. And I think that Robert Whittaker's a real special talent. We'll talk more about that in the second segment. Renato Moicano defeating Jeremy Stephens, 29-28, 28-29, 29-28. Just reminded me a little bit of Alan Jouban versus Platinum Mike Perry, right? It was a little bit of Bull and Matador. Moicano was a top prospect for a long time at bantamweight and featherweight and has had some injuries that have really slowed his roll a little bit, but smart fight here from the Brazilian. Jeremy Stephens, he's dropped a couple. How many has he lost in a row here? I don't know about this. Actually, yeah, he's had some trouble. He's had 2 wins since, he's had 3 wins since 2014. He beat Darren Elkins, lost to Cub Swanson, lost to Charles Oliveira, beat Bermudez, lost to Holloway, beat Barao, and then lost to Edgar and Renato Moicano. So, a bit of a tough run there for Jeremy Stephens. Alexander Volkov defeating Roy Nelson, 30-27 across the board. Nelson could really never get a takedown going. Improved takedown defense. I mentioned previously that Czech Congo was kind of probably watching this being like, there's a way to win this. But truth be told, Czech Congo's takedowns are actually pretty good, and Roy Nelson's, they could be better, but they're not great. Volkov's gotten better about getting his hips switched to the side when he's getting pressed in, better about underhooking, better about whizzering, is just general level improvement. And as I noticed on Saturday night as well, he just fights tall. He fights tall in a really good way. Fast, quick snap kicks, good jab, sits behind it, stays on his feet, and moves around. Is not too stationary. It's good to see a tall guy fight tall. That's what you got. Tom Duquesnoy defeats Patrick Williams at 28 seconds of the second round. Absolutely vicious performance from him. Look, Williams kind of put it on him early with just this avalanche of offense, and it slowed Duquesnoy down and made him sort of have to be thoughtful about things and certainly mind his defensive P's and Q's. But at the same time, once he, I mean, look, he set a pace he couldn't keep. And once that fact set in and Duquesnoy was able to take over, you saw what happened. The guy is tremendously talented. 4-year UFC debut in the making. Showed, I think, a wide array of skills, but those elbows, god damn. 3 over the top on the left and then a 4th in the right in that first round and dropped him. Probably could have called it there. But he went to the second round and then dropped him again with another set of elbows. Like, the guy is just, he's got offense everywhere, and it's violent, and it's aggressive, and it's quick, and it's impactful. I look forward to seeing more from him. Rashid Magomedov defeating Bobby Green via split decision, 2 29-28 and 128-29. Just Rashid a little bit lighter on his feet, a little bit more accurate, a little bit less hittable. Not a whole lot to say about this one. Tim Elliott defeating Louis Smolka. People wanted me, by the way, 30-27 across the board, which does not reflect how close this was. People really wanted me to talk about this fight on the Monday Morning Analyst, and I was going to, but there's just so much I couldn't. It was just an overwhelming amount of transitions and submission attempts and back takes and takedowns and tough run for Louis Smolka. Had a great win against Ben Nguyen and has dropped 3 straight. Now, he's fighting tough guys, but nevertheless, it's a bit of a rough run. He's just too willing to give up on the takedown. And he's got all these transitions, but he gets into things and out of things backwards. He's actually told me that personally, and you can go back and watch. You know what I'll do? I'll put the link up to that Ben Nguyen versus Louis Smolka link up here. You should check that out. You can see he gets into things backwards a lot, and that's a problem for him because you can do that if you're really confusing the other guy and you're a good scrambler, and he is a good scrambler, but Tim Elliott is a great scrambler. And so he would, if you get into a position backwards, you have work to do to then secure it once you've changed top-bottom positions or something like that. And so that little window where guys have to do work to claim it, he just gives an opportunity to his opponents every time. And someone like Tim Elliott, it's just not going to work on that. But, the same thing you saw Demetrious Johnson do, threatening a guillotine to make a guy go back down. Smolka did that against Ben Nguyen. He did it against Tim Elliott. It worked a lot. He had his moments with a back take, pounding on him. Like, both guys had this is, Tim Elliott is absolutely the rightful winner, and the guy's amazing, setting an insane pace that I'm surprised Louis Smolka was able to follow. But he just had the better top control, and he had the takedowns whenever he wanted them. Louis Smolka not fighting him at all. I think it's okay if you're not going to fight the takedowns if you can really do something with it in a very serious way. But if a guy is able to scramble with you like that and has submission defense like that, and he had that one darce, but if you don't have control over that elbow that you're using the darce arm for, it's just not going to do a whole lot for you. So, great performance from both guys. I would hate to see Smolka cut on this. I don't think he will be, but 3 losses is tough, man. It's really tough. So both guys are really talented. Tim Elliott has had a hell of a resurgence. This is a grappling equivalent of a slugfest. I really enjoyed it. Aljamain Sterling defeating Augusto Mendez 29-28. This is a redemptive fight from Aljamain Sterling. Getting the takedowns when he needed to, really minding his posture, never panicking in certain situations. You can see that Augusto Mendez, is probably the best grappler on this entire card for jiu-jitsu. Probably has the best jiu-jitsu in this entire card, even better than Wilson Reis. But, again, MMA jiu-jitsu being a little bit differently. But you can see those omoplata sequences he was setting up to either get a leg or to a sweep or to grab something else, maybe a triangle. He's nasty with it down there. So, good job by Aljamain Sterling by staying out of those things, really being mindful of his own range, being much more aggressive and committed to the pocket when he struck. There was a lot to like about this from Aljamain Sterling. This was a very tough fight because Tanquinho was no joke. He has strengths in areas of the game where Aljamain has a lot of strengths, and I don't think Aljamain could have really afforded a loss here. No one can really afford a loss in the UFC, but there are times when they're worse than others, and this would have been a bad one. But he stuck it out and showed what kind of quality he has and how he can learn from lackluster or bad performances. And you have to take your hat off to Aljamain Sterling. Devin Clark showing superior wrestling to defeat Jake Collier 30-27 with 130-26. Anthony Smith defeating Andrew Sanchez KO head kick at 3:52 of the third round. Sanchez has good passing. Nice tight passing, good takedowns. Big, strong, athletic kid, but you can tell he was fading. And guys like Anthony Smith, and people don't realize Anthony Smith has had a rough run of it. The guy's only 28 years old, but he's got what, 27-12 record. It's very deceiving. He's got a loss to Cesar Ferreira, Josh Neer, but the Josh Neer one came in 2013. Antonio Braga Neto, a ridiculous grappler, he lost via knee bar. Hadra Gracie, he lost in Strikeforce. He lost to Adlong Amagov, who was back in the day, he's just an incredible guy out of Russia. Jesse Forbes, he lost to in 2010. He had 4 losses in a row in 2009 and 10 to some guys you'd never heard of. You know, he had a rough run on that Midwest circuit, man. He fought in VFCs, the, Jesus Christ, Crowbar MMA, Extreme Challenges, made his way to Strikeforce, then fought in Victory, went back to Strikeforce, went to Bellator for a little bit, back to the regional scene, got the call up in 2016 for the UFC, dropped the Cesar Fajeda one. But this is my point. These guys who have been on these kinds of roads where they've just, you know, 28 years old, he's got a ton of miles on him. Nevertheless, man, they have tricks up their sleeve. They have a lot of skills, and sometimes they can't put it all together in the way that someone like Mighty Mouse can, you know, where he just hardly ever makes an error. But they can surprise you. They can surprise you because they've seen a lot, man. They've gotten a lot of looks from a lot of different guys. This guy's 28 years old and has, what, 39 fights? Who God knows how many he maybe have had in the street or, you know, in the gym. He's seen a lot, man. He's seen a lot. And so when Sanchez backed up and then ricocheted off of the fence, he was able to time it and catch it perfectly. Now, maybe he was looking for a kick because he thought he was going to angle out, but he caught him off the ricochet. Just great timing and awareness and a good decision to throw at that time from Anthony Smith. These things are not obvious. Guys make it look obvious. It's not obvious. And you just have to really take your hat off to that guy too, man. He was on the way to losing that one. You know, I admired his fact he was able to get butterfly hooks and underhooks and try and stand up. But Sanchez kind of had his way with him a little bit in the grappling department. And on the feet, you could tell he had something for him, but you know, he just waited. He was patient. He didn't lose faith in himself, and he was able to crush him with a brilliant shot. That's a great win for Anthony Smith, and he earned it the hard way. Zach Cummings defeating Nathan Coy via guillotine choke at 4:21 of the first round. Mike England is a terrible referee. I talked about that on my post-fight show. You can see that there. But how about Zach Cummings, man? I made this point before. I'll make it again. It's one thing for a guy to be like, you know, his striking's not great, and you see an improvement over time where it's like, wow, his footwork's gotten better. You know what? He's more disciplined with his jab. He doesn't raise his chin in the air, and he brings his hand right back to his face, or whatever the case may be. Zach Cummings is just better everywhere. Like, I'm not saying he's a perfect fighter. I'm just saying there's no part of his game that I can look at and say that hasn't improved substantially. Right down to the fight IQ. Like, he just makes awesome decisions about what to do in certain situations. This guy deserves a tough fight against a much better opponent, and I bet he will surprise you because Nathan Coy had nothing for him. The punching power that Cummings has, the pocket commitment that he has, accuracy, takedown defense whenever he needed it, submission awareness, locking it up quickly, adjusting it on the fly. Zach Cummings is a good fighter, man, and I would really like to see him get some tougher challenges because he deserves it, and he's earned it. And then Ketlin Vieira defeating Ashley Evans Smith 29-28 two times and then 130-27. Your fight of the night was Tim Elliott versus Louis Smolka, obviously. Performance of the night, Demetrious Johnson and Robert Whittaker. So good for all of those winners. Very quickly, let's talk about Rizin FF5 Sakura. This took place at the Yokohama Arena. Don't have any attendance or gate figures. Not going to go through the whole thing. Tetsuya Kawajiri defeated Anthony Burchak. Amir Ali Akbari defeating Geronimo Dos Santos. Doesn't say a whole lot, but he beat him in the first round, 334 of the first round, and from Mounted Crucifix. Ali Akbari had problems in actual real wrestling, amateur wrestling, due to doping problems, which I know drives the fan base wild, how much they hate that. But so I don't know if he's ever even going to fight in the U.S., but if he does, this is a top heavyweight prospect. He's very, very good. Athletic, quick, tremendous takedowns, naturally good grappler. You know, we'll see where his career takes him, whether he even wants to compete stateside. But the dude is good. Kyoji Horiguchi beating Yuka Matoya like a drum. Knocked him down, took his back, nearly submitted him, pushed him around, roughhoused him. Had this dude literally between the ropes over and over and over again. Unanimous decision win for him. Rina Kubota defeating Dora, how do you pronounce her name? Periyesh, I forget exactly. Brutal. She's a shoot boxing champion, which is like kickboxing with throws, kind of like Sancho, or kickboxing with takedowns anyway. Just brutal body shots to the liver. Good armbar escape early. She was almost caught dead to rights with a surprise armbar attack, but nevertheless, keep your eye on her from Rina. How about Tenshin Nasukawa beating Francesco Gilotti, I think is how you pronounce it properly, at 107 of the first round. I mean, this guy was just grossly overmatched, but Tenshin Nasukawa had this one moment where Gilotti was coming out of a corner and firing a 1-2. This dude leans, first of all, backs up, leans, turns a corner, and then fires a left hand and cracks him on the exit. Like, it was brilliant. He stepped away, he leaned, so the punch passes by him, pivots, and then crushes him at an angle. Vicious talent this kid has. Amazing. Reina Mura defeating Jazzy Gabbert via armbar. Yusuke Yachi defeating Darren Cruikshank. Cruikshank was coming in and doing well early, and the miking of this ring was really great by Rizin. But he had this left hook that he had floating out there, Yachi, and he caught him with it over and over again. And then finally, you saw eventually Cruikshank had trouble closing the distance, and the left hook, he actually banged, excuse me, was it a right hook? I think it was a left hook. I'm kind of having trouble remembering. But anyway, it was a lead hook that he had. And he actually punched him one way and then finished him with the hook the other way. It was kind of cool. Saori Ishioka defeating Bestare Kisage. I don't know who that is. Kana Asakura defeating Alexandra Toncheva. And then Seiichiro Ito defeating Kazamon Saiga. Whatever. All right. And then in Bellator, last but not least, winners on the kickboxing card. Karadom Gaji winning a split decision. Joe Schilling winning a unanimous decision. Raymond Daniels, knocking out his opponent with a spinning back kick in the third round. Yorina Bars absolutely beating the brakes off Irene Martins. And then Gabor Gaborix defeating Gabriel Varga, surprisingly, split decision. That's a surprising one. On your main card, Adam Borix defeating Anthony Taylor via rear naked choke. Lena Ovchinnikova defeating Helen Harper in the second round with the referee. Daniel Weichel, of course, defeating John Teixeira, although that was a surprisingly competitive contest, however boring. And then Eduardo Dantas defeating top prospect Leandro Higo, also via split decision. So there you go. It was a catchweight fight, so it was only 3 rounds. Okay, with that out of the way, let us go to the second segment where we're going to take a look at how Robert Whittaker got the signature win of his career and has now catapulted himself into space where he is a legitimate UFC middleweight contender. Let's do that now. Jacare versus Whittaker. Let's take a look at how Robert Whittaker got this done. Now, we're not going to look at every single piece of this fight, but some of the bigger highlights, some of the things that tell the story of the fight, from defensive actions to offensive actions from both guys. Early on, this is your story. Jacare, early and often, quite honestly, Jacare stalking Robert Whittaker, trying to find an opening, mostly counter-fighting on the feet. He was waiting for Whittaker to do something and either catch him with his own strike or, I think more commonly, trying to see if he can find an opening for a takedown. Neither of which really ever came. And on the right side, you see Robert Whittaker. A couple things you want to notice about this. Number one, he's bouncing. You can see him up in here. He was doing a lot of this. Now, not heavy bouncing, but, you know, nice and light on his feet. Number two, and look at the range here. He's at kickboxing range mostly, right? Why? Well, probably for a lot of reasons. He wants to stay as far away from Jacare as possible without giving up some kind of tactical advantage. And what it requires is him to be on the outside here. And because if you're in boxing range, you're in takedown range. So if you're at kickboxing range, you're not at takedown range, and you probably have an advantage if you're Robert Whittaker at this distance. But what it requires is him to lunge in a couple of times. Brian Stan noted it, but there'll be a couple of examples we'll look at where you can see that he's able to do that quite effectively. Sometimes he misses a lot, but it didn't really matter. Over time, he was able to either get Jacare to freeze or to gauge his reactions or to just constantly batter him without Jacare being able to follow up without any kind of response. Now, there were some things that Jacare I thought could have done differently. He could have gotten off first, and you'll notice he never really throws any kicks. He throws a couple up the gut, some push kicks occasionally, but he never really attacks this lead leg of Whittaker's, which I think is a very, very, I shouldn't say, well, maybe it is traumatic, but it's also a dramatic mistake as well. So let's go through these slides. Again, not everything, but some highlights, all right? And keep in mind this distance here. This will be a lot. He doesn't always operate at this space, but he operates at this space for the majority of the bout. All right, so here we are. He's looking on. I want to notice a couple things that he does. This is more defensive work, where he's able to exit out at angles. He did it a lot in the first round. Here you see him looking. He's lowering his level a little bit, sort of leaning side to side. Here he is. Is he going to punch? Is he feinting? Let's see. All right. He jabs this time. I think he reaches Jacare, not super heavily, but he does make contact. What does he do? All right. He reaches out of the way. He leans back. He's got his hand out to protect him. He's got his eyes on Jacare. He's going to throw a left hook as he's leaning back and getting out of the way. And then anticipating a response from Jacare, he's going to get under it. He's going to sort of duck or almost bow here anticipating a left hook counter from Jacare that never comes. So to get out on his own, he doesn't just merely exit, he throws a strike while he exits, and this one lands. Really sort of very technical stuff, and look, boom, he's gone. And he's on the outside. Really nice stuff. It's not, he had great anticipatory skills, number one, and when he sort of overdid his homework, he nevertheless stuck to the basics, didn't merely exit out with a strike, catch the guy while he's sort of not expecting it, catch him as you're leaving, make him worry about something while you're worried about something else, and he does it, right? Very, very good stuff. He did this a couple of times in the fight. Not exactly this way, but pretty similar. Okay, just 30 seconds later, here he is. They're facing off. Let's see again. You can see not exactly at punching range here. Kind of far apart. He's going to lower his level. Whittaker is. He's going to feint and faking the whole time. Getting reactions out of Jacare, get him to cover up, seeing what he does, seeing how he reacts, and building offensive responses around it. All right? Kind of leans in. What does Jacare do? Puts his hands up, and see, you can see where his elbow. Look at how upright too. I mean, his base is lowered a little bit, but one thing you notice from Jacare throughout the course of this fight is he's standing upright a lot, very, very upright. Makes him a lot more hittable. So seeing this, I mean, look, there's all different kinds of things you can do here to Jacare. So what does he do when he actually wants to commit? He throws. You can see he drops the hand, lean down. Jacare doesn't know if it's coming to the body. He doesn't know exactly what's coming. This is what Whittaker would do. He would lean in and put this hand right around his elbow, right around his waist, and his hand on the side, and he would come hook to the body, he'd hook to the head, he'd come straight up, and then drive an uppercut. He would do lots of different things with it, but it would all kind of come from the same position, so Jacare really never was able to get a sense of what was going to head his way. And this time he whips it around. Now, Jacare had the right idea about defense, but these gloves are so small, if you're really not precise with it, you're going to get nailed. So this left hook finds a home. Really good stuff. This sort of shows you that the system of attack that Robert Whittaker had. He would fake, he would feint, he would try something, he would disguise the way in which he would throw something, and then commit ultimately to an opening that he recognized. Right? That's what he would do. Now, Jacare tries to attack him. Again, Robert Whittaker evading, keeping his back off of the fence. Did a really good job of this. Watch how he does it. He's going to duck and watch the same thing. Or, he's, it's not exactly ducking, but, he's going to sort of lower his level here, and he's going to throw a left. As he exits out, you can see Jacare tries to grab him this time. So he rotates and turns into him, pushes down the head, and separates. Now, this is a little bit later in the fight. Jacare locks up a spot with him here. All right. Now what's he going to do? Now he's down with him here. There's a lot of things you can do. When you grab the ankle like this with your foot, you can kind of drag them out a little bit. You can then drag them out and then double off at an angle. If the fence wasn't here, you could drive straight into it. It'd be a lot of things you can do. I would kind of expect him to go this way, right? Because he's taking this away from the sort of the structure of the architecture here. But he can't, because what eventually happens is Whittaker frees himself. Right now he's going to split his base and he's going to get sort of hip to the wall here. So what does Jacare do? Jacare is going to pull him in and then roll over to come out on top. This is something you see Demi and Maya do. Not exactly this particular effort, but these sort of sacrifice throws. A sacrifice throw is when you go to your back to score a throw. And this is not exactly a throw. It's more sort of a roll through, but it's still going to his back. That's why they call him a sacrifice throw. So it's kind of like a sacrifice throw, right? There he is. Boom, right on his back, right? I mean, there's a risk involved in doing something like that. And he rolls through. But look at what Robert Whittaker does to nullify everything. If you can stop the structure of something before it ever really gets started, even if you're technically outmatched on the ground, I mean, jiu-jitsu is not magic. Wrestling is not magic. It is structural, it is real, it is scientific, and if you can begin to stop something before it starts, in terms of how a structure is built on a foundation, doesn't matter what they try to do after that, right? Watch. What do you notice here? Why is this not working? Jacare's got this leg hooked. He should be able to turn right into him and come out on top, but he can't. Why can't he? Because of this. He has wrist control, and it's not merely wrist control as such. What it does is, number one, it blocks the shoulder from coming out underneath, and it blocks this body from rotating. So he can't really go anywhere. He's kind of locked. He would like to be able to roll through. That's what sitting through is. That where you sit through like a baseball slide, and then you come out on top. But he can't come out on top because this locks Whittaker in place to his back. So he just comes up right with him. That's exactly what he does. So Jacare is like, let me see if I can try something else from this position to keep going, because, you know, Jacare is not going to get off you that easily. What does he do? He then sits back. Watch, look at this. He's going to sit to a hip and try and pull himself into a position where he is sort of behind and to the side, almost like a turtle position on Whittaker. But Whittaker is still not letting go of anything. He's still got that wrist. And Jacare can't really get a control of this leg because the knees are under him of Whittaker. So what is Jacare really controlling here? And I apologize for the smaller picture. What is Jacare really controlling here? Nothing. There's no part of his body that's being controlled. Look at that. He's still got the grip on the wrist. So Jacare got into a good advantageous space, but without being able to lock his hands or put his arms in more strategic positions or really any kind of position to manipulate the weight or body parts of Whittaker, it doesn't do him any good. Look at this. He's got nothing. He's got absolutely nothing. So what does he do? He stands up. Ordinarily, he'd probably try and trip him backwards, and maybe he could have done it, but his head's kind of getting wrenched over. He still doesn't have a grip of his hands. How are you really going to turn someone just by gripping their hip? You're not dancing with a girl. You're wrestling with a guy. So you just can't really just grab someone's hip and yank them behind you. You need to grip up your hands. Robert Whittaker never allows that grip of the hands to take place. And, you know, we all talked about sort of the blocking mechanism where his shoulders and his back come into play as well. This is brilliant from Robert Whittaker. Shut down the whole thing before it started. He's not going to play jiu-jitsu for jiu-jitsu with you. He's going to lock up in a central grip, which he will use to help him scramble because it will prevent Jacare from creating any kind of stable structure. This is elite prize fighting. All right, so he gets him back up against the fence. And he gets an inside trip here, right? Because Jacare's not done. He's tough, man. Jacare's tough, you know? And this looked like, I was like, oh, man, now he's got him. All right, now he got, you know, Robert Whittaker had a nice little run there, but that the control of the wrist is gone. Jacare's going to have his way with him, all right? Here he kind of shrimps up, and I was like, oh, man, Jacare's going to take him out here in an instant. But he doesn't. He gets here, and I'm thinking, oh, this is, okay, now Jacare is going to work his game. But Robert Whittaker doesn't panic and does a lot of really interesting things as he sinks this deep hook. Now look at this. This is a deep hook right here. But he doesn't really have anything. I mean, he gets the hook here, yes, but you would want to have something on the other side of the body to help you control. You would want to have some kind of structure to help anchor this hook up top. And remember how it goes. The hand that goes across the neck, if it's not choking, it's going to the chest. That's the one that goes on the chest, and then the other hand goes on top of the hand. In other words, this would have to go in the chest because it's sort of around the neck, and the other one that goes under the arm would then help in pushing the right hand into the chest, but he never can get that going. He's never really able to create a proper grip here. And this is the other key consideration. Now the hook is in, he's trying to get the other hook in. Okay, that's something. But look at what Robert Whittaker does as Jacare puts the left hook in. He drives his right leg back, so now Jacare's lost that hook. So now Jacare has no hook on this side, and on this side you can see he kept his hand right by his face, so he's never really able to get that proper backpack, that proper over-under control. Again, hand that goes over the neck, that's the one, imagine if there's a knife in there, that's the one that stabs the heart. In this case, it would be the right hand, close to the chest. Left hand goes on top of the right hand in this particular case, but he's never really able to make that. So what happens? Look at that. He's trying to grip up, but he can't really get where he needs to. There's nothing anchoring him on this whole right side. So what do you think Robert Whittaker's going to do? Whoop! Throw you off of his left side because there's nothing anchoring you. And then, of course, he steps away. All right, there you go. Now we're still in the first round. Here's Robert Whittaker. Still Jacare. Look how nice and tall he is in this one. When I say nice, I don't mean nice like like this is good for him. This is very bad for him. But look at him still committed to it. Still committed to it. Nice and tall. Robert Whittaker, hands by his elbow by his waist, hands down, anticipating a shot and setting up all different kinds of attacks behind his posture. He leans in with a 1, drives in, misses with the 2. This is what I'm talking about where he's really jumping into position, and sometimes it caused him to overcommit here. One of the errors he was making. Everyone's like, he fought a perfect fight. He fought like an A++ fight. He didn't fight 100%. Almost no one ever does. Even Johnson got hit a couple times in his fight with Wilson Reis, right? So then you see this. And then he throws a left here in this clinch to push him off, and it knocks Jacare down, but it doesn't actually land like a punch. Right? Here's another one. I want to show you something here. This is what I mean when I say I don't know why Jacare didn't throw any kicks in any kind of advantageous way. Look at how Heavy on the left leg, Whittaker is. Not merely through this whole fight, but in this particular moment. Right leg is up almost like he's throwing a baseball from the pitcher's mound. Right? I mean, look at that. I mean, he's got his hand, his hand way over here. This leg is taking a ton of weight, and this one's up in the air. I mean, usually you don't want to leave your feet like that for a jab, but he's collapsing a lot of distance at once. He's trying to get Jacare to react to him. I mean, there's reasons why he did it. I'm just saying, if you really go after this lead leg and he's trying to keep a game plan where he's keeping distance from you, you will take that away from him. Now, he might be able to adjust from other things. I'm not saying he can't win, but he had free reign here. No one ever really did anything to this leg, so he's able to put a ton of weight on it for long-range jabs or anything else he really needed to. Here's another one. He's going to fake. Now we're in the second round, beginning of the second round, right? What's he going to do? He's going to, hands down, he's going to flash, right? He's going to throw the one, and before this, he threw a left hook, by the way, right? So we start this round off with him throwing a left hook from the same kind of thing. Fake, gets a reaction from Jacare, throws a left hook, then he does the same thing again. He fakes, this time, throws a jab behind it, boom, then the right hand. This looks like the right hand doesn't land because at this point in the slide, when I took the picture, it had kind of slid off this direction, but it lands absolutely flush. Why? Because the first time, he threw a hook. The second time, he threw a 1-2, looked exactly the same to Jacare when it was coming down the pike, so he totally wasn't ready for it. Boom, knocks him on his ass. Follows up, and did some damage to him, but Jacare gets back up. Now here's what he does. As Jacare stands back up, flashes the left, throws the right, doesn't quite land it, but he's still going to stay on Jacare. You would think he might throw the left here, but I think he put so much weight on that left leg, he couldn't really swing it around. So as Jacare backs up against the fence, he jabs. He anticipates a reaction from Jacare. You can see Jacare sort of winding up and telegraphing here, right? And look at this. This is why all boxers tell you to keep your shoulder close to your jaw. This would have landed on him otherwise. Now, maybe not directly on the jaw, but certainly on the face. And because Whittaker keeps his chin tucked, I mean, you see it a little high here, but tucked enough, and he keeps that shoulder to protect him in front of it, the punch lands on the shoulder and slides off. Great job. You don't see a lot of guys in MMA really able to, you see it in boxing all the time where guys are able to really tuck themselves inside the confines of their shoulder wall. And Whittaker does it here. I mean, this is great stuff, right? Jacare shoots, it goes nowhere. All right, here we are again. Look, it's the exact same posture, and he's a little bit closer now, but this is still semi-kickboxing range, right? What's he going to do? He's going to flash the jab. Look at where the hands come out from Jacare. He never really brings his hands by his ears. He just kind of puts an X and sticks his hands out in front of him. Boom. Leaves the room for an uppercut. Why? Look at this gap. You could come around the side. You could throw this and then throw another left hook, but there's this giant hole in the middle. So rather than trying to come up the side, rather than throwing a left hook, which he'd already done before, crack him right upside with the uppercut. He left a giant opening for it. Here we go. Whittaker, sensing the end might be near, is now the one stalking. Remember, it was Jacare who was stalking the whole first round. The tables have turned now in the second round. Here he is. Same thing again. Look, it's the exact same setup, which is confusing. When I say the exact same setup, I'm complimenting Robert Whittaker. I'm saying Jacare just doesn't know what to expect here. Faking and feigning, he commits, boom. Catches Jacare thinking that it's going to be the right hand. Because look, he's going to lean down here. He's got this hand cocked. Jacare puts his hands out thinking, I don't want to get hit with another 1-2. And so he leans to get out of the way of what he thinks is the right hand and just eats this clean. But this is not the one that finishes him. Somehow Jacare, being a tough bastard, hangs on. Right? He throws a push kick here, which you see Jacare parry a little bit later, but that's only to set up this one pushback, 2 over the top that cracks him. And these, by the way, come in very quick succession. Another part of Whittaker's game plan, or not game plan, but I should say the reason for his success was just how quick he was with his speed. This all takes place. I mean, look at the frame. The second doesn't even change. Boom, boom, boom. I mean, it all works. By the time Jacare gets hit, then a second has passed. So there's the speed element to it. Now, he throws a right here to crack Robert Whittaker. That lands a little bit, but it's sort of another way he was confusing him here. All right? Hand down by here, but this time he throws it, gets him to drop his hands, to parry it, sets it up, 1, measures, 2, throws. Nice. All right? Now the end is near. Now look what's happening. Jacare has been backed up, and by the way, this is what this ultimate purpose was. I need to get you, not merely to get your hands down because we're going to strike in space. I want to get you backing up. I want to hit a push kick. I want to throw a one. I want you to lean up tall. I want to hit you and lean you up tall because we're right by that fence line. And by that fence line, you're not as good. And what direction does Jacare go on the fence line, right? He goes that way. He goes to his left. Here is Jacare. This is that, look. See this UFC post here? That's what this is right here. You can kind of see the cameraman standing behind it. He's waiting that direction. So what is Robert Whittaker going to do? He's going to flash. He doesn't even flash it up the middle this time. He flashes it to the side, and you can see cocks the hand. So what is Jacare thinking? Jacare is going to do the same thing. Put his hands out, maybe in an X position, maybe kind of trying to lean out of the way. As this punch comes this way, he wants to lean out that way to get away from it. But as he thinks this is coming this way, and as he wants to lean out that way to get away from it, just like this, boom, that's what happens, and closes the freaking show. And you know what happens up after here. He follows up nicely. We talked previously about whether the referee stoppage was okay, but you get the idea. This was really, really smart from Robert Whittaker. He had the right game plan, he used the right kind of distance, and he put everything from a similar position from his body about whether he was going to throw left hooks to the body, left hooks to the head, 1-2, a 2-1, which he also threw. I didn't talk about it here, but Dominic Cruz was like, after he rocked him with that first 1-2, you'll say, watch him, he'll go with a 2-1, which he does. And you can go back in the slides and see that for yourself. I actually did capture it. We just didn't talk about it in real time, but you get the idea. Just really had a nice game plan. Jacare, a really poor one. Stood up tall, was stalking, but was way too defensive. Wasn't really going after that lead leg of Robert Whittaker, which he really needed to cover that distance and do a lot of everything else to sit on his punches. Never took it away from him, was slow to react. Had defense that was just commonly problematic for him, both in the sense that it was the same thing over and over again, and two, that he never really got out of the way himself. The speed of Robert Whittaker giving Jacare all kinds of problems. So really just a kid who's coming into his own, who looks great at this weight class, who brings speed with him, and really more than that, brings with him a very camouflaged striking game. You know when he might be going to something because he has the same physical posture before he finally commits, but you have no real way of knowing which direction it's going to go. Pretty bang-up job by Bobby Knuckles here. And last but certainly not least, let's take a look at what's coming up in the week ahead. Now, there's a lot of regional MMA. There's actually some decent UFC and Bellator. Take a look at this list that was compiled by Jeffrey James at Fight Times on Twitter. This is incredible. You have Combate Americas. You have a one event. You have FNG, Bellator, LFA, K1 World Grand Prix, M1 Challenge, Absolute Championship Bearcoot is back. You have Brave, UFC Fight Night, which is the Swanson Lobov contest, Pancrase, Shuto, WFL, Kunlun, which of course is kickboxing, I believe, as well, over in China. So you've got a lot going on. You can take a look at some of those more regional cards if you want. For me, I just want to pay attention, if I can, to the UFC card that's coming up and the Bellator card very quickly. Cub Swanson defeating Artem Lobov. Al Iaquinta is back, taking on Diego Sanchez. OSP versus Marcos Rogerio de Lima. John Dodson versus Eddie Wineland. It's a bantamweight contest. Joe Lazon versus Stevie Ray. Jake Ellenberger versus Mike Perry. That is your main card. On your prelim card, Talis Laitis versus Sam Alvey. Dustin Ortiz versus Brandon Moreno. Scott Holtzman versus Michael McBride. Jessica Penne versus Danielle Taylor. And then on Fight Pass, Alexis Davis versus Cindy Dandois. Brian Barberina versus Joe Proctor. Hector Sandoval versus Matt Schnell. For your Bellator card, which will be on Friday, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, yes, at the Mohegan Sun. Daniel Strauss and Pitbull fight for the fourth time. Ilima Leigh McFarland taking on Jessica Middleton. Ryan Quinn versus Saad Awad. AJ McKee versus Dominic Mazzota. On the prelim portion of that card, Ed Ruth is on it. Tyrell Fortune is on it. Be on the lookout there. Okay, if you have any questions, email me at luke.thomas@sbnation.com. Please give me a like and a follow on Instagram and Facebook at Luke Thomas News. I really appreciate you guys watching. Subscribe to the channel, subscribe to my channel, and give this video a like, and tell folks about it. I would really appreciate it if you would. Thank you so much for watching. Until next week, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the fights.